1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Friday the 13th. You may only see it once, but that will be enough. Friday the 13th. Rated R.
Good evening. Welcome to episode number 7 of Constriction Pictures. Check us out over on YouTube and the original Constriction Pictures blog at constrictionpictures.blogspot.com. I'm Bob O'Rourke.
And I'm Tim McMahon.
All right, and a little bit later, we're going to have a little interview with longtime Constriction Pictures friend Jerry Downing about tonight's film. And tonight's film, what is tonight's film, Tim?
Friday the 13th.
Hell yeah. Everybody likes that.
1980 classic.
Yes, and obviously the reason that we're doing this, technically it's Sunday the 15th, but which I think if you go with the continuity that runs in the sequels, I think maybe in the third one, I think technically takes place on Sunday the 15th. If you go back and rewatch.
That's something I never even really thought about, but right? I was just having a conversation with somebody about that the other day.
But
I guess that's very likely that is the case.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what I love about the original, the first 4, is that continuity that runs through all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're pretty much all interconnected. But yeah, Friday the 13th, the original, I mean, it started it all. The series that, I guess for all intents and purposes, has really never ended, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it really hasn't.
I mean, people still talk about ideas for sequels or remake sequels, and I mean the remake itself I thought was pretty rad, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not too bad.
And I know, if they announced a new direct sequel, I'd be there, first in line.
Yeah, I would too.
Even if it's bad. I mean,
of course, I was in line for Jason X, and
yeah, so Jason X.
It doesn't take much for me to get in line.
No, of course not. Just give me the hockey mask, get some people chopped up, and it's all good, right?
Or the burlap sack. I'm good with that.
Burlap sack, of course, yes.
Good to Camp Blood, ain't you?
God damn it, Ralph, get out of here. Go on, get. Leave people alone.
You'll never come back again.
Oh, shut up, Ralph.
It's got a death curse.
Go for it.
Actually, the origin of it was Sean Cunningham's 1979 full-page ad in Variety, which had the famous logo that pops up at the in the movie at the beginning, during the credit sequence, and it says, "From the producer of Last House on the Left, the most terrifying film ever made." And that's really, he had that idea. He had the title and he ran with it, and I think he did that ad itself to sort of copyright the title because it had never been used.
Right, I think I heard that too.
And he banked on that to make, to get investors interested and back in the picture. And I think the original working title was A Long Night at Camp Blood. And obviously, Camp Blood runs through the first couple films with, what they call Camp Crystal Lake.
Right.
The story was written by Victor Miller. And I think recently, too, going back to what we were saying about how the series has never really ended and, there's always talk about sequels and remakes. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you've read this too, with Victor Miller, there's been some back and forth lawsuits over the character of Jason Voorhees.
Jeez, I don't know if I've heard about that.
Yeah, say something about how he wants his credit for creating that character, and maybe I'm going off on the wrong tangent here, but something about how, with the ending and everything, with it being a dream or not, and then the character of Jason popping up and being in the rest of the movies, he wants his due credit for creating that character. So I think that's been, I think the last I read, it was sort of, at a stalemate between, so-and-so's legal department and so-and-so's legal department.
Oh,
which
meaning
sucks.
More movies haven't been made because of this?
Something like that, yeah.
All these years later.
Yeah, because, with that remake, why didn't they do a freaking, sequel right after that? It made a ton of money, but nothing ever happened,
Yeah, I thought I read something recently that there was going to be another sequel, but I don't know if it had anything to do with the remake. It was going to kind of
Right, it was going to
pick
be
up, from the original
right,
series.
just a direct one.
Yeah.
Also, Betsy Palmer, she famously believed the film to be, quote unquote, a piece of shit.
Well, I'm Mrs. Voorhees, an old friend of the Christies.
But she accepted the role of Mrs. Voorhees because she needed a new car. You gotta admire that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And of course, we were lucky enough to meet her a few years ago, and the fact that she was still doing shows and she embraced all the fans and
Still wearing the sweater.
Yeah, I mean, shit. The first time I met her was at a Monster Mania convention, one of the first Monster Manias, and I was down there with my mom. Mm-hmm. And we got down there. I had won passes from something, and got down there almost too late. Like, I mean, literally the show was over, and we were just kind of hanging about outside. And Betsy Palmer happened to walk by and see us, and she came up to us and said hello. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty freaking cool. And, we didn't get a photo or autograph or anything, but we just said hello, and she was just the sweetest woman. And I was like, wow, I'm actually meeting her with my mom. That's pretty cool,
Yeah.
Then we've got...
I remember the time that you and I went and met her when I had Trevor, and Trevor was just a little baby.
Mm-hmm.
And she was all about Trevor, wanting to hold him and all that kind of stuff, and talk to him, and just super friendly.
Yeah, she was kind of like a grandma.
Yeah.
Then we got the music by Harry Manfredini.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, shit, that score, it's
excellent.
It's untouchable. Now, one thing here, and I know some people will probably maybe get a little angry, but it's ma, as in killer mommy, not ch ha ha ha. So, some people, they still say it wrong. But whatever, it's all good. You're a fan, right?
Yeah, sure.
And with Manfredini's score, 1982, Gramavision Records released an LP of selected pieces of the scores that he did for the first 3 movies, and it was really, I think, more of a promo tool for Part 3 at the time, because it had the 3D cover of, this cool art piece of Jason smashing through the window of a cabin.
Yeah.
And it featured the disco theme for Part 3, which is
wow, yeah,
which is cool. That's a rare record too. I mean, I've never even seen it in the flesh,
right? Yeah, absolutely.
Then you got special.
That was a tough soundtrack to find. Back in the '90s, I started buying CD soundtracks from different horror movies, and you had the Halloween soundtracks were all available pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Nightmare on Elm Street soundtracks being readily available, but Friday the 13th I could not find. I think there was a soundtrack to Jason Goes to Hell, which I could find, but I could never find anything else. I think I might have. The only way that I have it is through bootlegs that I've gotten at Killer conventions or Monster Mania conventions, something like that.
Yeah, it was. I think it was just that record originally came out, and basically the themes that are on there are in suites, 15-minute suites.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little repetitive and it's a little confusing. But a couple years ago, and I'm gonna kick myself for not knowing the company that put it out, but there was a 6-disc limited edition box set of the soundtracks for the first 6 films, and they were put out on CD, and they came out, and it was 1 through 6, and excellent quality, killer packaging and all that stuff. And now, obviously, with all these Waxworks records, all these companies are releasing these new multi-disc vinyl sets and stuff, and I think they're up to maybe the 4th one, I think.
Jeez, I don't know.
Yeah, because I see them all the time on Facebook. People talk about them when a new one comes out, and I think with the 3rd one, they put it out. The vinyl was different colors, like blue and red for the 3D, And I just can't get into that stuff because shit, I'll just keep going, with collecting it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now the other big thing about Friday the 13th, special effects by some guy named Tom Savini. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And think about this too. This is Savini literally fresh off of Dawn of the Dead, so he was just starting to really burst onto the scene, and Cunningham grabbed him, I think, based on what he had seen in Dawn of the Dead, and was like, "Dude, we got to get this guy." And I mean, literally, so Dawn would have come out in April of '79. I think is when it really started to hit here in the States, and Friday the 13th filmed in September of '79, so yeah, they would have grabbed him right away.
Good point.
Yeah, and speaking of filming too, it was September '79 in Hardwick, Blairstown, and Hope, New Jersey, where Camp Nova Bosco is. You and I have been there.
Yeah, I've been there a few times actually.
Yeah. It's fun. It's fun going up there, and a little bit later, I want to talk about something that's going on this weekend too. Up in that area. Now here's a really killer thing. So the movie was released on May 9th, 1980, on a budget of $550,000, and it grossed $59.8 million.
Wow.
And that's $1980, but still, I mean,
yeah,
that's a hell of a freaking kickback on an investment,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, really, I think when I first saw Friday the 13th, I said that, it's the one that started it all. And this is the one that started it all. I mean, like we just said, this series has never ended in 38 years. And I think it's as strong as it ever was. I think the only way it would be even stronger is if they had another movie coming out. But do you remember the first time you saw it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't tell you exactly the first time I saw it. I have a feeling that I might have seen the second one first.
Mm-hmm.
The second one came out in '81. I know for sure that I didn't see Friday the 13th 1 or 2 in the theaters.
Yeah.
So the only way that I would have seen it would be, one of these, late night network versions of it.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Unless it was shown on HBO or the Movie Channel or Prism or something like that way back then.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling, and I can't tell you for certain, but I have a feeling that I might have saw part 2 first. Just because I remember seeing part 1 and pretty much thinking like all throughout that the killer was going to be Jason.
Right.
And I remember even seeing, when Mrs. Voorhees comes around and thinking, oh, this sweet lady, who's she, But, of course we're going back quite a while, and I was only, 6 or 7 years old, the first time I saw it. So I can't tell you for sure. But yeah, like I said, I think I saw part 2 first and then saw part 1. And, it was kind of like a backstory type of, thing for me, I guess.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat because I don't remember, I was trying to think about it. I vaguely remember the first time I saw the movie complete, from front to back.
Yeah.
For me, I remember definitely seeing bits and pieces of all the movies on USA Up All Night.
Yeah.
And my, or like I remember seeing maybe on, Cinemax or something, HBO, and catching bits and pieces and, having to wait until my parents left the room before, I could switch back to the channel just in case there was nudity happening,
Right. The last episode that I did with you, where I just talked about, me getting to horror in general.
Yeah.
I do specifically remember my mother seeing Friday the 13th, the original, in the theaters. And I remember her seeing it with a friend. Mm-hmm. And like I said in that previous episode, I had been going to the movies with her to see a lot of horror movies. But this was not one of them. And I think probably because the way that it was, marketed or the way that people had heard about it, that there was a lot of nudity in it and, stuff like that, where a lot of the other horror movies that I was seeing with her when I was a kid, it wasn't as talked about, it wasn't as talked about, with The Shining or American Werewolf in London, or, you know what I mean? Like that there was nudity in them, or, sex scenes and stuff like that.
Right, right.
Whereas this was pretty much like right from the go. Right from the go, everybody kind of knew that there was boobs and butts and
Kevin Bacon ass cheeks.
Yeah. So I have a feeling that that's probably why my mother didn't take me to see this particular movie.
Sure.
But I do remember her going. I remember her talking about it, and I remember being kind of like, well, why aren't you taking me to see this one? Like I've seen so many others, and I remember being kind of like jealous that she was going with somebody else, and I couldn't go with her.
Yeah.
And I also remember her coming back and kind of talking about it and be like, it was definitely a step above in terms of brutality and violence and blood and gore than a lot, I guess, the other movies that we had seen at the time.
Sure. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, this one, I think, it's arguable that Halloween sort of started the slasher trend, but then I think Friday the 13th and the knockoffs of Friday the 13th, I think, sort of ushered in the splatter era of the early 80s with, where basically we would go see these movies just to see the crazy kills,
Right.
what
Sure.
they were going to come up with next,
Mm-hmm.
And that's all, really down to Tom Savini and what he did on this movie. And even looking at it now, it still seems so basic, but you got to put yourself into that mindset, like you were saying, of nobody had ever seen anything like this.
What had come before this?
Right, right.
Halloween is my all-time favorite, but it certainly wasn't a bloody movie. People getting strangled and knifed, but not like they did in Friday the 13th.
Right, right.
It was kicked up many notches.
Definitely. The funny thing too about the nudity is, really, I think the first one is probably the tamest in terms of the nudity. When you look at some of the later sequels, I mean, shit, even part 2 has, the girl skinny dipping Terry. And I mean, that's full on straight up nudity. And this one,
from top to bottom.
Yeah. And obviously part 5, which I think part 5 is probably, maybe like a close, I don't want to say a second favorite because, I mean, really, how do you choose between 1, 2, and 3?
Right.
But it's part 5 is like a grindhouse movie released by Paramount in terms of the nudity and ridiculous violence that happens.
Yeah.
It's good fun. It's fun for the whole family.
Absolutely.
So I think that kind of segues into the next sort of topic about like any significant things about the film. And for me, when I watched Friday the 13th, and we were just talking about this before we went to air, it stands alone, and watching it, there's such an innocence about it that every time I watch it, I try to put myself in the mindset of there is no towering juggernaut with a hockey mask. It's its own thing, and it exists as its own thing. And I mean, shit, it can stand alone as its own thing without, the countless sequels that came after it. And that's what I think works about it and makes it stand out from, obviously, the sequels, but also, I think, any of the other slasher movies that were coming out in the early 80s,
Yeah, I mean, to me, what really sets it apart is just the character of Pamela Voorhees.
Right.
I mean, she's essentially just she seems like a sweet old lady, or not that old, but whatever, a sweet mother who's lost a child, and now she's going insane. But when you first introduced to her in the movie, she's like a likable person.
Yeah.
And you just don't place her as being the person responsible for all these horrendous murders that you've seen, in the movie up until that point.
Right.
So, I'm sure somebody could pull a handful of names out, but, there probably isn't, at least up until that point, seeing movies, there wasn't a whole lot of movies like that where you are introduced to the killer, and it's just a sweet woman.
Yeah, grieving mother.
So yeah, it definitely throws you for a loop.
The other thing too that I love about Friday the 13th is its setting. When I watch it, I feel the summertime, vibe, but
Sure.
also, you're still in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey, so shout out to New Jersey, and
Yeah, absolutely.
and I mean, when I watch that one, and then you go and watch the sequels, like I can easily sit there and say that's not New Jersey. Come on, especially with part 6 and 7. I mean, when they're filmed in down in the South somewhere, I'm like that. Get out of here with that crap.
Right. I think for me, one of the things that really hit home about Friday the 13th and being filmed in New Jersey and the campground and all that stuff is that when I was a little kid, I would go with my parents to a campground, and we'd spend a weekend in the woods in a tent, not in cabins like they are on Friday the 13th, but there were cabins there at the campgrounds that we'd go to, and in the woods, and you knew that environment. I knew that environment as a kid, and we'd sit around a fire, and my dad would tell stories and stuff like that, scary stories to scare the hell out of any of the kids that were there. So to see this movie around that time, as a 6-7 year old kid, whenever it was that I first saw it, I'm going to guess I was probably about 7. I could relate to it. I could relate to the environment of being out there in the woods, in the dark, hearing, animals, and thinking that, there could be somebody out here.
Totally.
And it kind of, it really kind of scared the crap out of you.
Yeah, totally.
You think that this could happen, and being a little kid and having my father tell me stories about, people out in the woods or, whatever, some kind of monsters or something like that being out there. It kind of brought it all together. So it felt like it's something that definitely could have happened.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing too, and I thought you were going to go in this direction when you were talking about that, but when I was a kid, and so in my elementary school, we had a sort of the 6th grade class trip was sort of like a rite of passage, and we went to this place called Camp Bernie, which I don't even remember where it is.
Heard of it, but I don't know where that is either.
Yeah, everybody always talked about, it's the camp from Friday the 13th. And my little smart ass, I'm like, yeah, okay. And I knew, I think at that point, that it was filmed in New Jersey. And I remember when we went there and seeing it immediately, I'm like, this isn't the camp from Friday the 13th. I'm like, you're full of crap. And it really didn't look like it at all. But I think, and maybe this, or actually even here, there was somebody I used to work with was saying to me how, Friday the 13th was filmed because, where I live, there's a town nearby called Crystal Lake. And she's like, it was filmed, Friday the 13th was filmed there. I'm like, no, I don't mean to be that guy and shoot you down. But I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was filmed in New Jersey. I've been there, And, but I think, I wonder if maybe it's like that across the entire country, that everybody has that kind of story, or, like with Nightmare on Elm Street, if your town has an Elm Street, you're probably like, Nightmare on Elm Street was based on, this street right here, kind of thing.
Yeah. There's Elm Streets there's an Elm Street like right near my work. I drive by it every day. I want to pull my phone out and take pictures of it and send them to you. Yeah. It says Elm Street. But there's probably an Elm Street in every town.
Of course. Like Freddie says, every town has an Elm Street. So, the other thing too, I don't mean to, before I get off the New Jersey kick here, but the one thing that I've always loved about horror movies, and I kind of touched on this a little bit when it comes to sequels and stuff with the Nightmare series a couple episodes ago, but I love continuity. I love the continuity that runs through sequels. And for I'd say probably most of the Friday the 13th, there's always that continuity where, Jason's been essentially painted into this corner as he's been killed, and in the next movie picks up right after that, but there's this thread that runs through certainly the first 4, Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
and And I'm pretty sure it's also in the fourth one, but I know it's at least through the third one, where the cars still have New Jersey license plates. Even though 3 was filmed in, California.
Right. 2 was filmed in Connecticut, right?
Yeah. And there's in the scene where they go into the little grocery store to get groceries in part 3. There's even a little ad in the background for the New Jersey Lotto. And I'm like, shit, I remember that from when I was a little kid, seeing that all over the place, So it's just little touches like that I think certainly made me enjoy the movies more and appreciate them. But then on the flip side, when it comes to continuity, it's like, something like Freddy versus Jason, when they show Jason drowning in the camp, and it doesn't look anything like the Camp Crystal Lake that we know from the original Friday the 13th, or little Jason has a T-shirt on when he's drowning. I'm like, no. That shit's for the birds. Get that out of here,
It is for the birds.
Yeah, it's freaking garbage. Let's move on to the body count for Friday the 13th.
Sounds good.
So we've got first up, technically would be Jason, but I mean, even though we don't see him drown, but in the storyline, he's the first to die. Then we have Barry and Claudette, who are the two little, horny teenagers at the beginning.
Yeah.
We've got Mr. Barry. He gets stabbed in the gut, and you don't really see much. You just see the blood and holding his stomach, kind of thing.
Which one's Mr. Barry?
Barry is the kid, the kid in the camp counselor kid in the beginning. With Claudette,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And Claudette, she's the girl, she's kind of fighting her way, when at this point we don't even know who the killer is. We're technically in the killer's shoes as we're seeing on this first person perspective, kind of, the way this whole scene is shot. And Claudette is just screaming and kind of, freezes on her face as she's screaming and fades to white, and then we get the credit sequence. But we were just talking about this too. With Claudette, there's an image of her getting her throat slashed. And she's got a machete up against her throat, and there's blood all over the place, and you can clearly see it's her because she's got the yellow counselor shirt on.
Yeah.
And I'm sure somebody out here can chime in as to what exactly that was. And I thought it was some like goof that Savini did, on the set, some kind of not necessarily a prank, but like just a one-off thing that wasn't even filmed, right?
Yeah. Or maybe it was something that was filmed and just was never actually put in the movie.
Right. Then next we have Annie. She's the cook. She gets her throat slashed, and that's probably the first. Well, I mean, that is the first bit of Savini showing off his effects. And you get that cool, shot of the knife just gliding across her throat, and then her leaning her head back as the blood comes out, and it's effective. It still works.
Absolutely, yeah.
Then we have Ned. Ned is the sort of prankster. He kind of fakes drowning to get a smooch from Brenda early on, and I think he also sets up the stereotype of the prankster type of character throughout the rest of the series, and Friday the 13th knockoffs. But he gets his throat slashed off screen, and when they show his body later on, when you have the reveal, where he's sort of on the top bunk where Jack and Marcy are kind of getting it on, and you see that flash with the lightning and everything, and you see his throat slashed. It's pretty gnarly.
Yeah,
don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of sucks that it's off screen, but what are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
Then we get Jack, who, for those out there, I'm sure you might know this actor, Kevin Bacon. It's a real shame that he didn't go anywhere after, appearing in this film.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But he gets a nice arrow through the throat, through the bed, which I think anybody would say that would probably be like their standout kill, because
yeah, it's kind of got to be, and kind of how I had gone back to relatable events, just talking about the movie being based in the woods, a campground and all that. As a kid, I don't know what kid hasn't been afraid of being on a bed and being afraid, in a dark room of somebody possibly being under the bed.
Bingo.
So after seeing that, it's definitely something that was implanted into my brain. When I'm laying down, I'm like, well, where do I lay my head? Do I lay it sideways? Are they going to put this, arrow through my skull? Is it going to go through my back? Like, it definitely had me thinking about that after seeing that movie.
Oh yeah, and definitely even in the trailer. I mean, they show, as they're doing the countdown in the trailer, they show Jack laying on the bed, and you just see the hand. He looks up, and then the hand grabs him by the forehead.
Grabs his forehead.
You don't see anything else happen, but I mean, shit. I mean, my wife is still terrified of that. Of just like you said, somebody being under the bed.
Yeah.
And then next we have Marcy, and Marcy, that's actually a pretty brutal kill too, where she gets the axe in the face.
Yeah, I mean, that could be. I mean, that's pretty brutal too. Getting an arrow through your throat or an axe into your face. I don't know. They're both pretty damn brutal.
Yeah, and with her, it's interesting, and this is something that Savini's always talked about in interviews when he talks about doing the effects, is like he shows the axe first hitting the light, to show that, hey, it's a real axe, it's got weight to it, and then we cut and we don't actually see it enter Marcy's face, but we see the aftermath, and you think about like oh man, that had to hurt, that just the impact of that,
Yeah.
And it's a pretty, I'd say also with a lot of the photos of some of the kills from the original movie, that shot of her with the axe on her face before she slides down, I think that's pretty classic too.
Yeah, I agree.
Then next, I guess technically, I guess he would have been killed before Brenda. We have Bill, and Bill's a pretty gnarly kill, where whether you see it on like what I like, dirty old VHS or the Blu-ray, this one I think stands out better on the Blu-ray because you can see more detail. Where Alice is kind of the last girl at this point, and she's looking for Bill, and she goes down to the mechanics lodge, and comes out, and he's freaking nailed to the door with arrows. And I mean, dude, it's awesome,
Yeah, absolutely.
He's got what? He's got one in his eye, one in his neck, one in his chest, I think, and one in his groin, and I think his throat slashed. But the funny thing is like Bill didn't do anything to anybody. He didn't even. I mean, he drank some beer and smoked a little dope when they were playing strip Monopoly. I mean, but he didn't even hook up with Alice. It's like, poor
Didn't
guy.
matter. He was there.
He was there.
That's all that counted.
Yeah, and the poor guy too. Is Harry Crosby, Bing Crosby's kid. He got messed up with that too. I think he got burned in the eye with the prosthetic that went over his eye. If I remember correctly, it was the fake blood either seeped in between the prosthetic and his eye and like burned him. But he got pretty messed up from doing that, from just that hang,
Mm-hmm.
Then this one we were talking about, we were trying to figure this out, and I'm sure maybe it's in the Crystal Lake Memories book or even in the documentary, which again, if you haven't seen that documentary or read about the book, check it out, Crystal Lake Memories. Brenda, she, the last time we see her, she's following the voice of a child who, we're still not sure at this point what's going on, who the killer is, who's knocking these kids off. But we hear this ghostly voice of some little kid calling for help. And, Brenda runs out, and she's kind of running in the rain in her nightgown, finds herself on the archery range, which is a little bit of a callback to earlier in the movie when Ned is kind of flirting with her at the archery range. And we don't know what happens to her. We, hear her scream, and that's it. But then later on, Alice is hiding in the main cabin, and Brenda's body comes crashing through the window. And we see her, laying on the floor of the cabin, and her face is all like bloodied and bruised. And I mean, the bruises don't show as well, on an older version or older print, but definitely on the Blu-ray you can see she's got purple and stuff. And I don't know. I mean, was she beaten to death? Was she stabbed? Was she throat slashed? Was she all of the above?
I always thought when she went through the window that, she got all bloody from that, but who knows? I just assumed that she was just stabbed and that was that, and her body was thrown through the window. But
yeah. Oh, you know what? I just realized this is a total amateur move. We forgot Steve Christie.
Oh yeah,
Steve Christie. I think his is also another pretty terrifying kill early on, and I think he's before Brenda and Bill, where he obviously knows the killer because hey, what are you doing out here?
Right.
And then he just gets stabbed, but then later on you see his body pop up, which obviously I think that kind of harkens back to Halloween with all the bodies starting to show up, and but that's a pretty cool thing where he ends up swinging down from the tree when all the bodies start popping up. And then, of course, the grand finale, I think, is probably, I guess, all the different kills lead up to this one that's sort of like as the French say, the piece de resistance, right?
Okay.
with Mrs. Voorhees finally getting decapitated, and again, I hate to say spoilers, but if you haven't seen this movie, what are you doing listening right now?
Yeah.
It's a pretty gnarly kill.
Yeah, and when you asked me what was my favorite kill of the movie, I have to go with that.
Yeah.
Kevin Bacon's death is great, but geez, that whole fight scene on the beach of the lake, and the music that's happening, and you could just feel the tensions. Like one of them's going to get it.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
For Alice to come up, with that blade in her hand and just chop her head off is just incredible. And then the hands go up and they're like grasping as the blood squirts out of the severed neck, and that whole scene is just phenomenal.
The look on Mrs. Voorhees' face too. When she sees her coming at her, it's like, oh shit!
Oh, no. Yeah,
exactly. You've been dealing out all this punishment to all these kids, and
that whole fight scene alone. When Pamela Voorhees is banging her head in the sand and stuff,
she fights dirty.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, and they're biting each other and everything. It's just a great scene. It really is the culmination of everything that you've seen throughout the movie. Little bits and pieces here and there, quick, off-screen kills, and some right in front of you. But that one is like, wow, that's everything right there. This is the glory bit right here.
Yeah, totally. I agree. All right, so moving on, we're going to go to, as I said earlier, we've got a little brief interview with an old friend of Constriction Pictures, Jerry Downing. So let's go check that out right now.
It's gonna storm. You can tear down that valley like a son of a gun.
Right now we have Mr. Jerry Downing. He's an old friend of Constriction Pictures, and I'm talking way back to the blog days. I think you were one of the first subscribers, right?
Yeah, it might have been.
Right on. Thank you.
It's been a while.
Thank you very much for the support. Appreciate it. So with Jerry, I know Jerry gave me some shit recently about the Nightmare on Elm Street episode when I kind of poo-pooed on Friday the 13th a little bit, which is all in good fun. I love Friday the 13th just as much as Nightmare. Maybe Nightmare a little bit more, but that's besides the point. So I wanted to give Jerry a special shout out and a chance to come on and talk about the original Friday the 13th. So, Jerry, tell us a little bit about yourself real quick.
Wow, not really sure what to say there. Yeah, I've been a horror fan since I was a kid, really. I remember watching these movies at friend's house. Probably same story as most people that are into this. Kind of sneaking off and watching the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and that's sort of where it started with everything. But, yeah.
Right on. So you're here now.
Yes.
So, with Friday the 13th, would you say the original is your favorite out of the series, or do you have a...
It kind of goes back and forth. I mean, I think I got to go with the original one just
Mm-hmm.
because it's the original one.
Sure.
But
sure.
like part 6 is high up there for me too. Part 4.
Oh yeah, for sure. So with Friday the 13th, do you have a standout moment, a standout kill from it?
Probably from the first one. I still probably say Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon, yeah.
That's a huge standout.
Yeah, Jack getting that arrow.
The sleeping bag kill from part 7.
Yeah, for sure. Now with the original movie, we were just saying how I was watching it on Blu-ray the other night, and I think that this goes to the argument of that I sometimes have when I go through and watch some of these movies. I don't want to see them all cleaned up because the Blu-ray, as beautiful as it is, you can clearly see, speaking of Jack's death, you can clearly see the prosthetic on Kevin Bacon.
Oh, yeah.
And, especially that shot, that additional uncut shot where the blood's squirting out, that front shot of him. And it just looks, it looks poor, which, what are you going to do, right? So with Friday the 13th, have you ever had a chance to go back to New Jersey and check out any of the locations?
No, never. It's definitely on my list of things I want to do, but no, I've never been to that area.
Well, what are you doing right now, man? Get in the car and drive, right? So there was this whole tour thing going on this weekend too, out in Blairstown, New Jersey, and they're at the camp and everything. And Adrian King was there. I haven't seen too much, too much info, any photos. I mean, you've seen a few photos, I guess, but it's been kind of mum, right?
Yeah, I mean, that looked like it could have been fun.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, it seems like it was fun. I haven't seen a whole lot. I know Adrian King has posted a couple things. It looks like she's having a great time doing it.
That's awesome. So now, also with Friday the 13th, do you remember the first time you saw it?
I don't. So like I said, probably... I feel like it was like maybe 4th grade. I remember going at a couple friends, go over there and, watching like Friday. I was mostly Friday the 13th, but I'm guessing with Nightmare on Elm Street as well. But yeah, just, sneaking out watching the VHS. But I can't remember the first time I ever saw the movie in full because there was always just, little pieces here and here.
Sure. So now with that... Do you remember any initial reactions you had about it?
It's weird, this is my favorite horror series. I don't have a lot of memories from when I first saw it. When I first got into the series, or what really made this series stick out. It just is. I have more memories of Nightmare on Elm Street from when I was a kid than Friday the 13th. But
sure.
I don't know. For some reason, this one just stuck with me more.
Yeah. Now, here's a cool thing. Did you ever read the novel?
No, I never did. I think I was like looking at, but I think they go for a lot of money right now.
They do. I remember when I was getting into Friday the 13th, probably around the time when like Jason Goes to Hell came out, and I was kind of diving full on because I'd seen bits and pieces of Friday on USA Up All Night and stuff. But I remember going to the county library and borrowing the novel of Friday the 13th, and I mean, I must have taken it out, 2 or 3 times, and would read it front to back and loved it. Oh. And now, obviously, what you just said, it goes for a lot of money. I'm like, shit, I should have stolen it.
Yeah.
Not that I advocate stealing library books, but you just misplace it. And,
I would love to read that.
Yeah, it was cool. It followed the book it followed the movie pretty closely, but it wasn't like. From what I remember, it wasn't like basically just the movie in book form. I think there was some detail about some of the characters, which is why I love the movie tie-in books, because they kind of, they add another dimension to the movies you love.
Yeah.
But man, I wish somebody would repress that.
Yeah, that would be nice.
I don't know why that hasn't happened. I mean, maybe Paramount has the rights tied up or something. Who the hell knows?
There's a lot of weird issues with this series, it seems.
Yeah, and it's funny with the series as a whole. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was just thinking about that. It's like Paramount, I mean, it's safe to say Paramount made a lot of coin off of the series as a whole, but it's also like their dirty little secret.
Right.
As I'm sure anyone who's listening to this has seen in any documentaries, especially that Crystal Lake Memories documentary, which is excellent. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And just seeing the history of each of the films and the series as a whole. But yeah, it seems like Paramount sort of didn't mind making a lot of money off of the series, but treated it like not even a B movie, but like a Z movie almost. Like almost like a porno.
Yeah.
They didn't want to admit it. Yeah. What about Harry Manfredini's score?
Oh yeah, it's a great score.
Yeah.
It's one of those iconic horror scores. Now, of course, you watch some of his other movies that he scored, and it sounds very similar.
Hills Have Eyes Part 2.
He just has that style.
Yeah, he does.
It totally works for this series. Yeah.
What about now? Do you have that multi-disc limited edition soundtrack set?
No, I don't.
Rich has that.
Of course he does.
Of course he does. No, I've heard it. I may have found it in a alternative method, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I may be able to send it your way at some point.
Okay.
It's very cool, especially with the original movie, because it has the full version of "Sail Away, Little Sparrow," which is the song that plays at the end of the film.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also the song that's in the diner, the sort of honky-tonk country kind of ballady song.
Okay.
With Sandy and Steve Christie playing. Yeah. Good stuff. Now, who all have you met from Friday the 13th over the years? From just the original movie.
Just the original. I'm trying to think. Adrian King.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually weird. I haven't met a lot of people. A lot of people from the series don't do shows, or at least the ones I've been to. But yeah, Adrian King. I met Betsy Palmer.
Yeah, Betsy was great.
I've actually met Kevin Bacon.
Nice.
I've met Ari Lehman.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Yeah, and then of course Tom Savini
Mm-hmm.
and Harry Manfredini.
Nice.
I want to say that's it. I think that's all I met from the series.
Well, how did you meet Kevin Bacon?
He does like his Bacon Brothers show.
Oh yeah.
And somebody had said like, oh yeah, he's really cool. If you go to hang out by the bus, he'll come out and he'll sign. So even though we went, the security out there was like, oh no, he's not here. He's gone already. He's not. They were trying to chase us away.
Yeah.
But we stuck it out. He eventually did come out, and he signed.
Nice.
I got my poster. You can't really even see his signature because he just wrote KB.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still cool. He signed my poster. I got a picture with him.
Nice.
So, he was nice.
That's cool. That's because there's, I think especially with the Friday the 13th series, going back to what we were just saying about how it's sort of like treated as a black eye or something within Paramount. I'm sure some of these bigger actors who went on to better things, like Kevin Bacon, people would immediately assume that they'd be kind of a dick about acknowledging it. I mean, there's been rumors of like Jamie Lee Curtis, for instance, denying that she was in Prom Night. When people would bring stuff for her to sign, it's like, but you're right here on the front cover.
Yeah.
That's not you. But that's great that he can embrace that and be cool to the fans.
Yeah,
that's awesome. All right then. Well, do you have anything you want to say about Friday the 13th in general?
One other thing is the thing I love about Alice, Adrian King. She's not like the typical final girl, like what a stereotypical final girl is.
Yeah.
I mean, at the beginning of the movie, she's, hammering up a gutter. She's doing work just like anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
She's not like this, scared, fraidy cat.
Right.
I mean, when they're doing the strip monopoly, she's playing. She's, she's smoking pot and drinking beer. She's just another character. It's not like, oh, she's the, the shy virgin that, is going to become the hero. She's just another, counselor, really.
Sure.
So it kind of goes against the mold of, what it became.
Yeah, I get that. One thing, though, that has always kind of bothered me, and maybe, like I was thinking about this when we were watching it on Friday, where she finds Bill again, spoiler alert, everybody, where she finds Bill dead, and then she runs back to the cabin and locks herself in the cabin and piles all that shit in front of the door.
Yeah.
It's like it just keeps going, and she just piles more and more shit. And I'm actually surprised that like something like Student Bodies didn't like parody that, even harder than it's already parodied in the film, And then, of course, when the Jeep rolls up and she has to get out, she has to take all that shit down. It's so goofy, But yeah, I guess in closing, Friday the 13th, it's a classic. It's one of those movies that I remember when I first saw it, telling people I finally have seen the one that started it all, really. Because, 38 years later, we're still talking about it. The series... it keeps going, even though technically it kind of ended, but it keeps going and going and going, and people want more. I know I'd be down for a new direct sequel or a sequel to the remake or whatever,
It's so surprising that after the remake made a bunch of money that they weren't just pumping out sequels. It seems like it was so easy.
Yeah.
Like this.
I wonder if it comes down to the way that remake ended. With it kind of being up in the air about Jason, whatever happened to him, and maybe today's writers just don't have the the common sense to come up with a great, how do we bring the killer back kind of angle, which was definitely apparent in throughout the original series.
Yeah, when everything that all the this is what the next movie is going to be about, and this is what it's going to be about. Everything. It seemed like they were trying to overthink it.
Yeah. Big time, I think. And that's the other thing, too. I guess to get off on a little quick tangent here, it's like when you do a remake of something, that was one of the things that I didn't like about the remake to Friday the 13th was all, like, the cliches were so on the nose.
Yeah.
Like, the pot stuff was so, like, ridiculous. It was like, okay, we get it. Pot, yay.
And that's the thing that if you go back and you watch the movies, like, especially the original one, it's not something that they're like, we're going to do this. This is going to be great. They just do it, just like normal people would.
Exactly. It's not up front.
They smoke a joint or whatever. And it's just something they do. Whereas it seems like even in the Texas Chainsaw, it's like the Platinum Dunes thing, I guess, where they make a big deal out of it.
Yeah, it's I kind of blame that mentality on, I guess, the fans that are now the creative forces behind these movies. It's like they're doing it to I guess, overemphasize it and make it goofy and silly. And I think, one thing, and I'm sure my wife would call me a snob about this, but I never refer to these movies as cheesy because to me they're not cheesy, but I think when they get into that kind of territory with the remake and try to overemphasize these cliches and they're too on the nose about it, to me I think that's cheesy. But that's just me.
Yeah, I agree.
Word. All right, well, Jerry, this has been a good time. We'll definitely, I think maybe somewhere down the line we'll have to talk more about the rest of the series or any other favorite horror movies you got that we haven't talked about yet. Yeah. But yeah, man, we'll talk soon, and this has been fun.
Okay, yeah, it was.
All right. And all right, and we're back. Thanks again to Jerry Downing for talking with us a little bit ago. He's a big Friday the 13th fan, and
very cool, Jerry. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and we'll definitely do some more stuff with him later on at some point. We were trying to think of other movies that he's a fan of, and he's like, there's all kinds of stuff, like he said. So we'll see what happens.
God, this place. Steve should never have opened this place again. There's been too much trouble here. Did you know that a young boy drowned the year before those two others were killed? The counselors weren't paying any attention. They were making love while that young boy drowned. His name was Jason. I was working the day that it happened, preparing meals. Here, I was the cook. Jason should have been watched every minute. He wasn't a very good swimmer. You see, Jason was my son. And today is his birthday.
Where's Mr. Christie?
Oh, I couldn't let them open this place again. Could I? Not after what happened.
Now, I guess the other big memorable thing for Friday the 13th is the ending. And for me, I kind of talked about this a little bit ago too, with you, where, you know, I said my parents had seen all these movies when they were dating, and they saw Friday the 13th when they were dating. And, you know, with the ending, my dad says he knew what was going to happen at the very end, you know, telling my mom it's all over.
Your dad had one up on me because I certainly did not know.
Yeah. And
I will say real quickly, I don't want to interrupt you because I know you're about to get into it, but no questions asked throughout that entire movie. That ending was the scariest part of that entire movie. And I will still say that ending is one of the scariest endings of any movie I've ever seen.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, dude, I you know, it obviously owes a lot to Carrie, but I mean, I think it's better than the Carrie ending just because, again, it's the music, man. The music kicks in.
It's just so peaceful. And, you know, she's, after everything that's happened throughout this entire movie, this poor girl, everything she survived, and she's, you know, made it to the morning, you know, and she's in this boat just, you know, with her fingers running across the water, you know, just pure peace. And then all of a sudden, I mean, this kid pops out of the water from behind her. He is one ugly son of a bitch. A real rot face.
With the freaking, he's got like lake muck and leaves, and, you know, not least of which his physical deformities.
Is he dead? Is he just you know, you don't know what a story is, and it happens so fast that it just, you know, I probably the first 20 times that I saw it, I probably jumped through the roof, you know. And even when I watch it now, I still sit there like waiting for it, like it's coming, like preparing myself for it, because just when you think it's going to happen, no, it doesn't happen yet. Boom, then it happens.
Yeah,
you know, that is a great ending. They really pieced it together flawlessly, and you know, watching it, I didn't know at the time whether it was a dream sequence or it was, you know, really happening, but I think I just always assumed that it was a dream sequence, just because, you know, once the cops, you know, bring her up and they're talking to her, I guess, when she's in the hospital, and, you know, we didn't find any boy, you know. You just think, well, she must have just been dreaming, you know, because they're on the beach of the lake, right? When she's in the boat. Yeah. So you would assume that they would have seen something, you know. Right. Which is funny because I was just I had just watched part 2 with my youngest son Travis on Friday the 13th 2 days ago, and my wife, and you know, part 2 starts with the end of part 1. So they're seeing it and they start asking me, you know, well, why didn't the cops, you know, do anything? I mean, they didn't, you know, and I'm like, because it's a dream. It's just a dream. And they're like, well, then how does Jason end up as, you know, in part 2 and throughout the rest of the series? And it's just like, oh, I don't want to get into that. It's,
the simple answer. The simple answer is Jason comes back because money. That's what it is. There was money to be made.
Yeah, because it's a movie.
Yeah,
it's just the way it goes.
But I mean, that ending. I mean, you nailed it right there. I mean, that's, and I think what my parents were saying about seeing it too, with my dad laughing as he's saying, you know, I had to peel my mom off the ceiling of the theater. God, you know, I mean, it makes me want to see it. You know, it's like, I got to see this. I got to, you know, and have the same visceral reaction too. You know, it's just. It's so wait,
did you have a warning about the end of the movie before you saw it?
I don't know.
I did not.
Yeah, I don't know, because I'm sure when I talked to Dad about it, talked to Mom and Dad about it, it was probably, it had to be after I saw it, you know, because my dad I don't think he would go out of his way to ruin it, you know? Yeah. So, I mean, we would have been talking about it after I had seen it. And again, I don't remember the first time I saw that, or I had seen I want to say I saw pictures of little boy Jason before I saw the movie, because I remember one. I think it was a Famous Monsters of Filmland, or might have even been Cracked Magazine, which is weird because Cracked Magazine was like a humor magazine. But I remember there was this cool pull-out thing of a Friday the 13th body count from like all the movies. And
was it like mocking the movies?
No, it had all the. It was literally like just a straight up body count for all the movies, just in how each person was killed. And I can't remember. I want to say it was Cracked, but I think it crossed over because I remember also there was maybe a Famous Monsters of Filmland that had something like that, and I think there was a cover art of Jason, the little boy, with all the leaves and crap all over his face, and it was terrifying for sure. But that ending itself, I mean, I'm with you. It's a dream, It's a dream, but it leaves it open ended, where obviously we see Alice. She's in the hospital bed screaming and sort of again like Carrie, with Sue Snell, jumping up in bed and screaming and everything. But and again, going back to the New Jersey thing, my family here in Illinois, they always laughed about how Adrian King says, the little boy in the water, the one in the water.
Yeah.
And then when I come on the scene and I say water, not water.
Oh yeah.
It was like, oh, okay, that's how we talk, what it is. Yeah. But then, also too with the ending, there's always been this discussion about whether or not, all the sequels would have happened if that ending hadn't happened. And there was a lot of talk about Savini coming up with that as, on a whim. And if I remember the story correctly, it was, Sean Cunningham was like, we need something to end the movie really with a bang, and,
right.
The legend obviously is, let's have Jason jump out of the lake. And I think even at the time there was sort of a, the discussion about, well, Jason's dead. He was never really there to begin with. And, to me, that works as a dream ending, a nightmare ending,
Yeah,
same here. Yeah, and that's all it is. And again, that's what I love about this movie is that it stands on its own. You could enjoy the hell out of the original Friday the 13th and not see any of the sequels. The sequels are just a bonus as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's a huge lasting impact with Friday the 13th, and something that I alluded to earlier in this episode was, obviously with it being Friday the 13th this weekend, there's a lot of stuff going on up in Blairstown, New Jersey right now. They're really, really celebrating Friday the 13th as a whole, which is great. And I wish I had been able to get over there just to check out at least the museum. I think they were having in the Blairstown Historical Museum, they were going to have some props from the film.
Is that only happening this weekend?
As far as I know, yeah. And so they were doing that, and they were doing obviously the tours at Camp Nova Bosco. But I think like the tickets for that it was like a lottery. You had to enter to even get a chance to purchase a ticket. And the tickets were like $150 or $175 or something.
And weren't you staying overnight and everything?
That's a bonus. And that was like you had to bid on, that VIP thing. And I don't even know what the final tallies were for that. But I mean, man, if I had disposable income, I'd be plunking down.
Yeah, I had multiple people like contact me on Facebook, like, Tim, this is right up your alley.
Right.
You got to, you're going to do this, right? And I remember looking at it and thinking, no, I'm not going to spend that kind of money.
Yeah.
And, like I've been to the camp twice. I've explored it on my own. Would I like to get like a guided tour, with some historical facts? Absolutely. But I don't know that I'd, spend that kind of money. But the museum does sound really cool, though.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I did read about that happening, and I think when I read about it, it was months away in the future. I didn't realize it was this weekend that it was happening. thinking it was happening sometime during the summer and whatever. But that's how life goes. Everything you hear about everything, and then next thing you know, it's here. So
and it's past.
Right.
You know, I'm with you though. It's like everybody was like hitting me up about it, saying, you know, posting it on my Facebook, and you know, even my parents were sending me newspaper clippings about like everything that was happening, and I'm like, yeah, that's great, you know, 175 whatever dollars, you know, for a guided tour. It's cool, but again, I've done it myself for free, you know.
Yeah, there is something cool about just going there by yourself without a guide, and like we did, you know, go into that main cabin and walk around on our own. You know, granted, I know we weren't allowed to be there, and I know we probably would have gotten in trouble if someone caught us.
Sure.
But, you know, there's something to say for that, where we just kind of walked around and explored the place on our own. And you know, I just remember, like, I picked up rocks off the beach, and I remember sitting there thinking, like, wow, these rocks could have been here when that was filmed, you know. Brought them back. I still have, you know, one in my kitchen. I think I gave one to my sister, one to a friend. But, yeah, that was pretty cool to be able to go there, you know, on your own and just explore it.
Yeah.
But a guided tour would be cool, too. But I just don't know how, you know, how much freedom you'd have.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe you'd have more. Maybe do whatever. But
I've heard conflicting things, that I guess that there was like some very strict rules, and for obvious reasons. I mean, it is still an operating, you know, Boy Scout camp, and I guess there was certain stipulations of things you could and couldn't take photos of, which, you know, makes sense. But I mean, at this point in the year, obviously, I don't think there would be any, you know, kids actually there yet, because it's before the season and it's cold as shit, you know.
Yeah, I don't really understand. I don't have a full grasp on that myself, because it seems like anytime I've been there, you know, different times of the season, and there's apparently something going on there all the time, whether it's winter or it's summer or fall, whatever. That's what it seems like, that there's always something going on there.
Yeah. One cool thing though, and I guess too, what you kind of alluded to it about being there that first time, and even the last time, you know, I was there too, where it was sort of the unknown, and I think it kind of adds to the suspense of being there, you know.
Yeah.
But I remember, so for those not in the know, you know, obviously Tim lives in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey, and Blairstown and Hope aren't that far from where I grew up, like literally like 40 minutes north of where I grew up. And I first went up there in 2003 on a whim with my parents, because I you know, was like, I want to go check this out, you know. And went up to Blairstown and saw the sites that are in Blairstown, like the old mill, the little bridge that Annie walks across in the first, you know, Friday the 13th, the present, you know, kind of shot. Yeah. And then the diner as well. And when I was there, the diner still looked the same. It still had the big diner letters on the roof and everything.
Right.
And I have a photo of that, but it was like a photo that I took across the street, because I was nervous about, you know, are these locals, are they, you know, into, you know, horror fans coming into their town, or are they going to, you know, be standoffish? And and I mean, even I think when we went up there to the diner together, it was sort of, I think they were a little more open-armed about it. But for a couple of years there, every Friday the 13th, I would drive up to the diner to have lunch. And I would go up there by myself, you know, and just do my thing, and you know, see the other sites and stuff. And I would never go out of my way to wear like a Friday the 13th shirt, just to kind of be a little low key, you know, about it. And I remember one time sitting there, and there was a dude, you know, sitting there with a Friday the 13th shirt, and I'm like, oh, that guy's gonna get yelled at, you know. and then there was one other time where they actually had one of the little NECA Friday the 13th Part 7 Jason figures, like up on top of a shelf in the diner. So I'm like, all right, they're cool. They know what's up, you know.
Yeah.
But then,
that's what I've always heard, that they were very cool.
Yeah.
I've actually never. Every time I've gone out there, the diner is closed. So
right. That's right.
Never been in the diner. But,
they have weird hours apparently, but good food. You know, for sure. If you get a chance to check it out, I highly recommend it. And then the funny thing is, and this is one of the things that I've always loved about going to like film locations, is how you know, how everything kind of is spread out, but through the magic of film, it all looks very close together. So if you're going north, you actually hit Hope, New Jersey first, which is where you come to sort of like a crossroads at a stoplight. And if you go left, the cemetery is right there.
Yeah.
And the cemetery still looks the same. I mean, literally, it's where Annie gets dropped off by Enos, and that's a pretty cool little spot to check out. And then if you go right at that light, there's like some storefronts, and there's a little antique shop in there, and that is actually the what stood in for the little luncheonette that Annie goes into asking for directions to Camp Crystal Lake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was able to match that up from looking at like screenshots and looking out through the window and see that the building was right across the street. I'm like, oh shit, it's there.
You know what's interesting about that scene? There's an actor in that scene that you're gonna know who he is. That real strange looking guy who's been in a lot of different movies. He's just like working in that little store. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. It's shit.
He's got that disease where he's like overgrown. He's really big and tall, and I think that's what he ultimately died from. But he's been in a bunch of movies.
Yeah, and he's got like that weird forehead. Erwin Keyes.
Yes, that's it. Big giant forehead.
Yeah.
And I forget what the name of the disease is, but
yeah. And he, it's funny because he doesn't even have any speaking part in that. He just looks weird.
No, but you see him and you go, holy cow, I've seen that guy before.
Yeah, in a million movies. And one of the last things he did was House of a Thousand Corpses.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
But so the funny thing too. So all right, so she's in the luncheonette there, and then later on when Enos and her come out, to go to his truck, they show. And that was the first time I went to Blairstown. I was always looking for that spot. I'm like, where's that spot where they come up, where they run into Crazy Ralph for the first time on that little storefront. And that's not in Blairstown. That's in Hope, actually. And that's right literally down the street from where the luncheonette place would be. And it still kind of looks the same. I mean, it's obviously been painted, a few coats of paint and stuff, but you can see the little hill where they come up. And I found that spot finally the last time I was in town, like 2 years ago. And then literally right across the street from there, just like they do in the movie, is where Enos's truck was parked. And then the other...
That is one thing I have not seen.
Yeah, you got to go. You got to go. If you go back up there, let me know, and I'll show you exactly where it's at. You look at my pictures on Facebook. But then after that, you go... there's some other roads and stuff, and the road stuff is kind of difficult to find because it looks the same, and it's hard to, visualize it when you're driving, especially if you're by yourself. But then I found the little bridge that Enos's truck drives over too when he's driving with Annie. But the cool thing too, just being up there, and I think this is another testament to Friday the 13th as a whole and the legend of Jason and Mrs. Voorhees, and especially if you're playing the music in the car when you're driving around that area, it gets kind of creepy. As you get closer and deeper into that area, you're like, holy shit, this is where all this stuff was filmed and technically where all this stuff takes place,
Yeah, the one thing that I took from it was it from all those years, not a whole lot has changed.
Right. Right.
It looks pretty similar to how it did. So that's always cool when you see something, so significant like that and it's recognizable.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of things that have, from other movies and you get to take a look at them and they don't really look how they looked, and you're really grasping at straws to even connect that it's the same thing,
Right.
But not with this. I mean, this movie, these scenes, and it all looks pretty much the same.
Yeah, and I mean, when that first time we went to the camp and we pulled up, and I mean, literally everything was shot in that little area. The camp is obviously pretty big. The archery range is pretty far, deep into the woods and everything where that's located, and that still looks the same, ironically. But all the cabins are right there. I mean, the main cabin, the bathroom cabin, the little cabin that Jack and Marcy are in, I mean, it's all right there. The boathouse. The only one that I think or the only two that I think aren't there anymore. And again, somebody listening could totally correct us on this probably. Brenda's cabin, which I believe was a little deeper in the woods. I'm not sure why she was so far away, but her cabin wasn't there. I think that's been torn down. And the cabin that Ned goes into, where he sees somebody peering from the door, can I help you? That one I think is long gone as well. But again, somebody who's probably doing the tour this weekend could, fill us in on that, which would be cool. But the other thing too, I haven't seen very many photos from this tour. And I don't know if there's an embargo on it where they're not allowed to share stuff or what. I did see one guy posted a photo of his laminate for the tour, which is kind of cool looking. It's got the Camp Crystal Lake sign, the yellow sign, and that looked pretty neat. And then a friend of ours she actually represents Adrienne King, so she was there for the overnight thing, and she posted on, I think it was on Friday because she was there the night before sleeping over. She posted a cool photo looking out from inside the main cabin across the lake at like dawn, and it looked really cool, and I was like, man, that would be so sick.
Yeah.
And then I saw another picture just today of a dude dressed up as Crazy Ralph, jumping up behind Adrienne King, who's sitting in the canoe in the lake, and she has the yellow raincoat on and everything, and he's jumping up portraying Jason, which
I didn't even realize Adrienne King was going to be there.
Yeah, she was doing a I guess kind of a hang type of thing, but with that VIP sort of bidding thing, to do an overnight. She was actually staying overnight with a handful of selected people that were lucky enough to be these VIPs. And so she stayed overnight, and I don't know any details about what they were doing, or if they were making s'mores, or if she was making coffee, like she does in the movie. But it sounds like a hell of a lot of fun, and I think actually Ari Lehman was there too. I think because he's from Chicago, and I think he posted something on Instagram that he was going to be heading out that way, and I think he was supposed to be there at least in Blairstown, not necessarily at the camp, but that would be very cool to check out. So I guess in closing, do you have any final things you want to say about Friday the 13th?
If you haven't seen it, see it, and if you have seen it, watch it again and again and again.
Damn right.
That's about all I can say. It's one of the greats, and it's absolutely necessary for you to see it. There's so many movies that came after it that were directly influenced by it. Like you said, I mean, Halloween might have kickstarted it. And again, Halloween's still my favorite, but Friday the 13th definitely kicked things into a whole different realm, as far as the violence and it was a groundbreaker. So see it and enjoy it.
Damn right. Totally agree. 100%. It's the slasher movie that keeps on giving. Well,
yep.
Halloween keeps on giving too, but Friday the 13th, I think, is just. I mean, I think we've covered a hell of a lot about it in this last hour. So
we can continue on different episodes. I mean, I could go on, and talk about part 2.
Yeah.
In a future episode. Which, not to give too much away, but part 2 is probably my favorite of all of Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
As much as I love part 1, and maybe it's a tie between part 1 and part 2. But I really like part 2 a lot. But we'll continue that on in the future.
Yeah. Let's get out of here. What do you say?
I'm good.
All right, everybody. Again, thanks for listening. Keep listening. Keep supporting Constriction Pictures. Like we've kind of hinted at before, we got a lot of cool things in the pipeline. We got a lot of ideas for this podcast to improve it and keep it going. So yeah, thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for sticking with Friday the 13th. And Constriction Pictures.
Next time.
coming
Until
at
next
you
time, right?
next time. Exactly. Just like a
All
sequel,
right.
right? We keep going.
Yep. We never die.
Later.
Later.
Are they all dead?
Yes, ma'am. 2 of my men pulled you out of the lake. We thought you were dead, too. Do you remember very much?
The boy. Is he dead too?
Who?
The boy, Jason.
Jason?
In the lake, the one who attacked me, the one who pulled me underneath the water.
Ma'am, we didn't find any boy.
Then he's still there.